All right, so first, would you state your name for the record?
Absolutely. So my name's Paul. My last name's Dangel, Dangel, and I live on 357 Oak Trace in Hoover.
Very good. So have you decided whether you would rather give an opening statement or a closing statement?
Yes, I believe I'd rather do a closing statement.
All right, so we'll save that for the end. And first, we'll start with Counselor McClinton, who will ask you some questions, and then we'll move down the line.
Excellent.
All right.
Paul, thank you very much for applying. It's a big thing for the community. It's an unpaid and a thankless job, so thank you for applying.
Absolutely.
I have probably just two questions. In one of the questionnaires that Counselor Driver had y'all fill out, one of the things about the understanding about the Stout versus Jefferson County Board of Education
Yes.
segregation case. Can you give me an idea, your understanding of it, and what are the 5 green factors that we're held accountable to?
Absolutely. So I think, what I'd start off is saying the ultimate goal is to get to the unitary relief from that original order. But my understanding of the case and of the order is that it started many years ago when Jefferson County was a different place than it is now. And as Hoover split off, there was some concern about segregation and segregation of schools and segregation in the county. It kind of seems as though it was not as popular of a conversation until Gardendale kind of stepped up and said, hey, we want to split away too. And there was the concern then at that point that we were getting too many segregated groups to get away from the segregation. So the order, as I understand it, is the 5 green zones. And I will try to remember from memory, but I do recall that one of them is transportation, certainly. And really, in every one of these 5 green zones, it's about equality and about ensuring that we're not segregating, right? And that we're not putting our schools or our transportation or our teachers or any of the above in a situation where it disrupts what Hoover should be. So transportation, certainly one of them, faculty and staff being another one, the facilities being a third one, as well as there's 2 more, and I'm drawing a blank on them. So, but
Good. One was zoning and one's extracurricular activities. So
excellent.
I grew up here in Birmingham. I went through that little social experiment many years ago.
Right.
I understand definitely the intent of what Birmingham and the South used to be versus what they are today. I think a lot of people do not understand how difficult it is to get us out of that unitary status because it's much more complicated than people think, and some of your colleagues over here would say the same as well. But working with your colleagues, what steps would you take to help get us out of that status?
Absolutely. So I think everything that we do as far as decisions, and we look at the schools, and if there ever is a conversation about building another school or adding a different activity at a school, that has to come into play. It has to come into play and has to be part of the conversation because we need to make sure that everything we do keeps us in that green zone and keeps us in the green area for an extended period of time to be able to go back and have that conversation with judge, with the lawyers and say, this is everything that we've done. This is every step we've taken, and we understand how vitally important it is. And I think it's also important to talk about how diverse Hoover is, right? And you start talking about the number of different ethnicities and languages that are spoken, and that factors into it too. It does seem as though, as you get into the order, that it's really a lot about segregation and about race. But there's so much more to Hoover than that, and I think that has to be something that we have conversations about and explain that we're looking at the entirety of the picture.
Okay. Last question.
Sure.
Something I know that you were probably involved in because you have your culinary background, hospitality background, RC3.
Yes.
Do you think RC3 should be expanded? I know some people say have a 3rd high school. Some people say we should expand RC3, make it 2.0. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll address the 3rd high school first, right? Even if there was the decision that enrollment was increasing, which to my knowledge it's not, it actually has declined the last couple of years, but increasing and there was a need for the 3rd high school, that's a 10 to 12-year project, right? By the time you buy the land, clear the land, and get that going. So That's not an immediate situation that's going to resolve itself. So that does lead back to your question about RC3. I think one of the things I would like to see, as you see the board last year approved the $2.5 million to expand automotive, right? Certainly with Honda and Mercedes and other entities around, that makes sense. I think as you look at what's next and begin to grow it, you've got to get some, and maybe it's a citizen advisory board or a company advisory board to figure out what skill sets are needed, who's hiring, who's looking for those students, and what could we do to make the most impact with that. Because as I put in a lot of my questions, to me, one of my most important factors is where are our children as they graduate? Are they ready to go to college, to the military, to the career? And I don't weigh one more than the other as it looks at that. And if there's just something that we know we could get folks hired, these students hired when they were ready, when they came out, that we as a board or we as the city of Hoover could put into place, I mean, what an awesome situation to have, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here, Paul. Just a couple of quick questions. What do you feel is the most important issue facing our school district, and how do you plan to address this issue?
So I feel like it kind of goes back to the question I just discussed with Councilman McClinton, is that graduation and what happens after graduation. Certainly, from my time with the chamber, our goal has always been to get students to graduate and come back to Hoover, right? And we've all had neighbors and friends, or even our own children. I'm not there yet, but other children who graduate and say, I got to go live in Nashville, or I got to go live in Atlanta, right? Part of that is because it's cool and hip and there are things to do there that Hoover hasn't quite, or even Birmingham hasn't quite developed yet or embraced. And hopefully that comes down the road. But the other part of it is those quality, high-paying jobs that I'm ready for after college or even after high school. And again, it goes back to RC3 or to the schools of what can we develop to have them want to stay here, to have them have jobs. You know, I certainly know that as these children today, we'll call them, they come out and they say, you know, I want to make $100,000. I've been told for 2 years I can make $100,000 my first year out of school. Maybe you can if you can write code and do some of those things, right? But I think we have to find those trades. We have to find those areas to keep those students engaged and want to keep them in our Hoover area. So I would work, as we mentioned, with RC3. It's a program that I've been very involved with through the years. I was asked, considered a big honor, I was asked to join their PTO next year. And my daughter's going to go there for cyber innovation. And I think that, you know, just having those opportunities are fantastic.
And you've been around the school system, being part of the school foundation.
Yes.
What would you consider the biggest strength? What are we doing right?
Oh, my goodness. It's so hard to pinpoint one thing that we're doing right? But there are so many things that we're doing right. And I think a lot of it right now seems to involve mental health. I think, you know, seeing the proactive approach to a lot of the things we're doing with individual education plans and 504s, but also our counselors. I mean, what a commitment last year from this board and from Dr. Kevin Maddox to hire more interventionalists and to have more interaction with children. You know, when we started, when I was a child, and based on the numbers I've looked at, 1 out of every 150 kids, children, students had autism. And they're saying that number now is as high as 1 out of every 36. So, you know, just looking at Hoover High School alone, 2,900 kids, we'll round it off a little bit, right? But I mean, that number is high, and 2 or 3 counselors and interventionists are probably not going to get that done. So I think that's something we're doing well, is adding to that and recognizing that as a challenge. I could go on, RC3 and a number of them, but that's the one I'd point to.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
I'm good, Derek. How are you?
So just 2 questions for me. As it relates to K-12 education in the material books and things that are published in their libraries, do you believe there should be some form of regulations on that? Or what's your thoughts about regulating material within a library?
I think, as far as regulating the material, I'm not sure that I have a strong opinion, but what I would say to you on that is I think it should be age appropriate. And I think as we look at what's in our elementary schools and our middle schools and our high schools, it needs to be age appropriate. And, one of the things that, just being honest with you, I struggled with a little bit this year and had a great conversation, and some very positive came out of it. But with my daughter's teacher in ninth grade at Hoover, they were studying Romeo and Juliet, right? And I won't ruin it for you, but there's a suicide in that book, and it was during a time in our system where it was being talked about a lot, and I kind of had a challenge, and again, I never approached it as we shouldn't do it, right? It was more the approach of, please help me understand how we're teaching this, how we're working through this. Are counselors involved? Are we having those conversations? So I think it goes back to age appropriate time and situation. I certainly can see the value and understood the lesson in having that conversation. But I'm not sure I would want my fourth grader reading that, right? So I think that's where you have to draw the line, and we have to have some trust in our librarians to make good decisions and have those books in place. We need our kids to be kids, and I certainly would be very happy if they were in the library reading books and not on a cell phone.
And my last question, there's some discussion about the Department of Education being abolished,
Yes.
eliminated. What is your thoughts on that?
Wow, that was one that it hit me kind of hard, right? I think when it came out, my concern was what happens with the IEPs, what happens with the 504s, what happens with all the children that we are trying to protect and get to that next level. And while I don't know that I overall agree with getting rid of the Department of Education, I do appreciate that there was discussion about those things, and there was discussion about and it wasn't just let's pull the Band-Aid off. I think that it's something that we all have to be cognizant of and we all have to be aware of, but I don't know how much control we can yield over keeping the Department of Education, right? So I think as board members, as citizens, as parents, we have to read up on that and understand what it means. If it completely goes away, if Ms. McMahon completely takes it away, what does that mean for our schools and what does that mean for Hoover? And the last point I'd make, and Dr. Maddox and I had this conversation a few weeks ago, is our district has the ability, within reason, to do what it needs to do. So if the Department of Education goes away and they say, well, we're not going to have individualized education plans, and I'm being a little dramatic because I don't think we're at that point, but if they said that, it's still Hoover's decision if we're going to write a document to take care of these children and have a program in place with counselors and do those things, right? Unless there's a federal law that says you can't do that, that's a different conversation. But they're just saying, as I understand it, that we're not going to support some things. And we're not going to, it seems like it's mostly, at least right now, centered around student loans, which is a little bit challenging because a lot of these students need those to go to school. But as we talked about earlier, if we get a career and get things going, then maybe there are different opportunities. Yeah.
Mr. Dangel, pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much for applying and your interest in serving.
Thank you.
One of the critical issues you put in your application is school funding. A topic
Yes.
you and I have talked about.
Yes, sir.
I'll name two. Let's say two areas where our school district is coming up short that money would fix.
I think that the first area, and it's probably more capital than coming up short, but we're starting to see the age of some of these buildings come into play. And I know on the capital list that the amount that was just approved for bathrooms and for day in and day out facilities that wear out over time. Certainly, being in the hospitality industry, I'm familiar with that, and no building's going to last forever without doing things. So that's one area I would look at, and I know capital. With the $29.4 million that was spent or approved this year, a little bit different than the overall $258 million. But that's an area that I think certainly deserves some focus because, again, even if we decided tomorrow, which I'm in no way advocating for at this moment, but if the board got together and said, hey, let's build a third high school, that's a 10-year project, right? So by then, Hoover High School is 10 years older. Greystone Elementary, 10 years old, Bluff Park, some of these schools that are facing some of that stuff. So that's an area I think that we need to focus on. And my second area of that would be I would tend to lean towards doing something more than we're already doing for that special education area. And I know that's something that we did put focus on in 2024 into the 2025 school year, but I just think the need just continues to grow. These children, I just did a book club that Hoover High School put on with Dr. Hogan about the anxious generation and how these children have grown up differently because they've always had a cell phone in their hand than we did, where we were out playing with our friends and doing things differently. And so, getting back into the classroom and into learning, it was humorous. Lee Halsey, as I'm sure you're aware, just passed or brought forward the cell phone bill through the House in Montgomery. And I was discussing with my daughter. She's like, "Oh no, I got to have my phone in class." I'm like, "No, you don't. Like, no, you don't. You'll be just fine." So I think that's an area that we need to focus on.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Mr. Dangel, how many Board of Education meetings in Hoover have you had occasion to attend?
I have been to 2 in my time. Yeah, I get a demerit there for sure, but certainly have attended other meetings, but I know that wasn't your question.
So follow up to that, whether or not it happened at these 2, I'm sure you're aware that it's not always a cordial environment. Sometimes there can be criticism or disagreement.
Absolutely.
How do you handle disagreement or criticism, especially in a public or emotionally charged environment?
Yeah, well, first, I will say, as again, we talked about growing up, right? So I grew up in a different environment, and I grew up in one of those situations where I had a football coach that would yell at all day, every day, right? That was the mentality. And I've always told people that if you want me to stop listening, you can just yell, and I'm just going to sit there and take it. If you want to have a conversation or get to my feelings, just sit down and say, "I am deeply disturbed," but just that quiet dad voice, right? So the emotionally charged part of it, as somebody who's in the hospitality industry who has guests regularly, 25 years of having guests that are charged up, angry brides, angry individuals that have stayed with us for a number of reasons. I think the answer is really you try to find that common ground. What do you have in common? And sometimes, honestly, it's looking at somebody and disarming them and just saying, "You know what? You're right. We didn't handle that well. We really didn't. I didn't, or I didn't, or I hear your opinion, but let me tell you where I'm coming from." And I think it's that opportunity to just be humble. And you're not going to please everybody every single time, but a willingness to have those conversations, not shy away from them. I think we've all at different times had that phone call we have to return, and we go, but you pick up the phone, you make the call, and you do what you're supposed to do.
All right, so with respect to the Board of Education itself, when the board is divided on an important issue, what steps would you take to try to reach resolution?
Yeah, and certainly this is something I've had experience with. As you well know, we were on a board with me with Leadership Hoover and been there for a number of years, as well as the Chamber of Commerce here in Hoover and the Schools Foundation. It's going to happen, and I think you have to talk through it. You have to understand everybody's side and try to find that commonality. I had a situation just today related to another board I'm on for a sales organization. And it's an individual that had applied to take some time off from our organization. And previously they had taken time. They came back, they stood up in front of us, said, "Hey, I'm part of this. I want to be here." Blah, blah. And now we're 3 weeks later, and this individual has asked for a leave of absence. And my first gut was no, but I very fortunately waited and saw some other responses from other individuals on the board that were saying, "Prayers for you." Yes, absolutely. And so I picked up the phone and I called one of them and I said, "Hey, I was really about to vote no on this. Tell me what I'm missing." Well, there was a very elaborate story and a very good reason. And so I was very glad that I took that time, that extra step to work with my board and to have the conversation of like, help me understand what I'm missing here.
Very good. All right, we will listen to your closing statement whenever you are ready.
Excellent. It's not very long. I just, in closing, want to thank each one of you. And as you said at the beginning, it is a unpaid, thankless job, but that doesn't mean that I want it any less. It doesn't mean that I don't want to be here. It's something I've spent the greater part of the last week thinking about and spending time with. And I'm deeply invested in education and in seeing Hoover succeed and the Hoover City Schools in particular succeed, both through all the programs that we have. And one thing I didn't mention earlier is we talk a lot about high school, right? But it doesn't start in high school. These kids that are building cars in 11th grade, that didn't start in 11th grade because they got there that day. It starts with our wonderful elementary schools and is fostered through our middle schools and gets into the high school, and they're given those opportunities. When I hear a neighbor tell me the other day that they went to the University of Tennessee on a visit to look at the school, and they're looking at Tennessee as well as Auburn, and the students at Tennessee told her that the things she's been doing at Hoover High School, they don't even offer at Tennessee in an advanced program. So it's amazing. And I have thrive and passion for that. It's a chance to make a lasting difference. And I know from both a professional and a personal standpoint, it means a lot to me. And I think that my time, my quarterly meetings with Dr. Maddox, being involved with the group that is raising over $100,000 annually for the Hoover City Schools Foundation has only just fostered how much I love Hoover Schools, and really would like this opportunity.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all.